The floor dropped from under me, before any alarm even had the chance to scream. I was halfway through tightening a coolant valve in the lower engineering deck of the Amber Horizon, when the entire ship lurched sideways, like something massive had grabbed us out of the void, and shaken us the way a child shakes a toy. My wrench flew out of my hand. My shoulder slammed into a support beam. Somewhere above me, metal groaned, in a way metal is never supposed to groan. "Ethan, report." Captain Callahan's voice cracked through my earpiece, sharp and fast. "I don't know yet," I shouted back, pulling myself up by a pipe. "Feels like we hit a gravity pocket, but there's nothing on the charts out here." The lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied into a dim emergency red that painted the whole corridor the color of a warning nobody had given us yet. I am not a hero. I want to say that clearly, right at the start, because everything that happened after this moment only makes sense if you understand that. My name is Ethan Voss. I fix engines. I keep pressure seals from failing, and I keep reactors from screaming. And on a good day, nobody on this ship even remembers my name. I like it that way. Quiet work, steady hands, no surprises. That day broke every single one of those habits. I grabbed the handrail and pulled myself toward the central shaft, boots slipping on a deck that hadn't finished deciding which way was down. Through the small viewport at the end of the corridor, I caught a glimpse of space outside, and what I saw made my stomach twist harder than the shaking ever could. There was a world out there, not on our course, not on any chart I had ever loaded. A massive planet, its surface cracked with lines of white-hot light, like a piece of pottery someone had dropped and was still watching shatter in slow motion. Around it, structures the size of small moons hung at broken angles, venting streams of gas and debris into the dark. Something enormous was dying out there, and we had sailed straight into the edge of its death. Whatever that is, I muttered to myself, we need to be far away from it. The ship shook again, smaller this time, like an aftershock. Then came a sound I will never forget as long as I live. A high, tearing screech of metal against metal, followed by a heavy, bone-deep impact that rattled every bolt in the hull. It came from the cargo bay. Something hit us. Naomi's voice came over the comm, tight with focus. She was our pilot, and if her voice had an edge like that, it meant she was fighting the controls with everything she had. Small craft. It clipped the outer shielding and got pulled into the open bay before I could seal it off. I don't know what it is. "I'm closest," I said, already moving. "I'll check it. Ethan, wait for security." I didn't wait. I don't fully know why, even now. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe some part of me already sensed that whatever had just crashed into our ship needed someone there fast, before fear or protocol decided what happened to it. The cargo bay doors hissed open under my hand, and smoke curled out to meet me, thin and sharp-smelling, nothing like anything from our own systems. Sparks were still falling from a twisted shape near the far wall, a small pod, no bigger than an escape capsule, its hull scorched black and dented, like it had been thrown here rather than flown. For a second, there was only silence, broken by the tick and hiss of cooling metal. Then the pod's hatch groaned open on its own, crooked on a broken hinge, and something stumbled out. At first I thought it was a person. That was my first mistake, though an understandable one, because the shape was close enough to human that my mind reached for the nearest familiar word. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face turned toward me through the drifting smoke. But the skin caught the red emergency light in a way human skin never does, pale silver blue, almost glowing faintly along thin lines beneath the surface, like veins made of starlight. Her eyes, when they found mine, were too large, too dark, rimmed with a faint gold that seemed to pulse in time with her breathing. She wore what was left of a robe, torn and burned at the hem, the kind of fabric that even damaged still looked like it belonged on someone important. On her head sat a thin circlet, cracked down one side, its remaining half still glowing with a soft light that flickered weaker with every second. She looked young. That struck me harder than anything else. Whatever she was, whatever title or power she carried, her face held the kind of open fear you only see in someone who hasn't yet learned to hide it. "Hey," I said quietly, raising both hands slowly, palms open. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." I don't know if she understood the words. I doubt it. But something in my tone must have reached her. because her wide eyes locked onto mine and stayed there, like I was the only solid thing left in a world that had just come apart around her. She took one unsteady step forward, then another. Her legs gave out on the third. I moved without thinking, closing the distance in 2 strides and catching her before she hit the deck. She was lighter than I expected, trembling all over, her breathing quick and shallow against my shoulder. Up close, I could see thin lines of what might have been blood, dark violet instead of red, tracing down from a cut near her temple. Her hands closed around the front of my jacket in a grip far stronger than her shaking body suggested it should have. She buried her face against me and did not let go. "It's okay," I said again, softer this time, more for myself than for her. "You're okay. I've got you." Footsteps pounded into the bay behind me. I heard Victor's voice, our security officer, sharp with alarm. "Ethan, step back from it. We don't know what that thing is." "She's not a thing," I said, surprising myself with how firmly the words came out. "She's scared half to death, and she's hurt. Get Lena down here. Now." Victor hesitated, weapon half raised, uncertain. I understood his caution. None of us had ever seen anything like her before. Out here, in the space between charted systems, an unmarked pod crashing out of a dying world could have meant anything. A weapon, a trap, a trick. But she wasn't attacking. She wasn't threatening. She was a young woman, or whatever the closest word for that was, in whatever language her people used, clinging to a stranger, because he was the only steady thing left standing in the wreck of her escape. "Just get Lena," I said again, quieter. Victor lowered his weapon, though his eyes stayed wary. "On it," he said, and disappeared back down the corridor, calling for our medic. I stood there in the smoke and the flickering red light, holding a girl who was not from any world I knew, whose entire body still trembled with the aftershock of whatever nightmare she had just escaped. Behind us, through the twisted opening in the cargo bay's outer wall, I could still see the dying planet outside, its cracked surface glowing like a wound that refused to close. Whatever chased her out of that world, I understood one thing already, without needing a single word of her language to explain it. She had chosen this ship. She had chosen this crash, this landing, this stranger's arms, over whatever waited for her back there. And she was not letting go. Lena arrived within a minute, medical kit already open, dropping to her knees beside us. "Let me see her," she said gently, and for the first time, the girl's grip on my jacket loosened, just slightly, just enough to let Lena check the cut near her temple. "She's stable," Lena said after a moment, running a scanner along the girl's arm, watching numbers scroll across its small screen with a frown of concentration. "Vitals are strange, but strange isn't the same as dying. Whatever she is, her body's holding together. Mostly shock, I think, and exhaustion, like she hasn't slept in days." "Can you move her?" I asked. "Not yet. Let her breathe first." The girl's eyes flicked between us, wide and wary, though something in her posture had softened, just a fraction, now that the sharp edge of panic seemed to be draining out of her. Her gaze kept returning to me, though, again and again, like she needed to check I was still there. "I'm Ethan," I said slowly, tapping my chest with one hand, keeping my voice calm and even. "Ethan." Her lips parted. For a moment, I thought she might not respond at all. Then, quietly, in a voice like wind moving through something hollow, she repeated the sound back, imperfect but recognizable. "Ethan." Something in my chest tightened at that. I don't know how to explain it better than that. A single fragile word, spoken by a stranger from a dying world, and somehow it felt like the beginning of something I did not yet have a name for. Behind us, the alarms finally began to quiet as Naomi regained control of the ship's systems. The shaking stopped. The red emergency lighting held steady instead of flickering. Whatever gravitational storm had thrown us to the edge of that broken world seemed to be releasing its grip, at least for now. But as I looked past the girl's shoulder, out through the torn hull toward the wreck of the world outside, I had the growing, uneasy feeling that the storm we had just survived was nothing compared to the one that was still coming. She hadn't fallen into my arms by accident. Nothing about the way she moved, the way she chose this ship out of the endless dark, felt like an accident. And she still had not let go. Lena managed to get the girl onto a medical cot 20 minutes later, though it took quiet coaxing, and even then, she would not release my hand. Every time I tried to step back, her grip tightened, her wide eyes flicking toward the door, as if she expected something terrible to walk through it. "She's bonded to you," Lena said, not looking up from her scanner. "Not in some strange biological way. Before you ask, I mean it simply. You're the only steady thing she's found since whatever happened to her. People do that. I imagine her kind does too." "Great," I muttered. "No pressure." Captain Callahan arrived not long after, filling the doorway of the medical bay with his usual calm, unreadable expression. He was not a cruel man, but he was a careful one, and careful men do not enjoy surprises that fall out of the sky without paperwork. "Talk to me," he said, arms folded. Lena gave him the numbers. Vitals steady. Some bruising. A minor cut, already closing faster than human skin ever would. No obvious weapons or devices on her, aside from the broken circlet, which Lena had left in place, unwilling to remove something that might be important without understanding it first. "And no idea what she is," Callahan said. "None," Lena admitted. "But she's not a threat. Whatever put those marks on her, it wasn't friendly." Callahan's gaze moved to me, and to the hand the girl still refused to let go of. She latched onto Ethan. "She has," I said. "Any idea why?" "None at all." He studied her for a long moment, the way a man studies a puzzle with no picture on the box. Then he exhaled slowly. "Fine. We hold position, quietly, away from that wreck out there, until we understand what we're dealing with. Ethan, since she trusts you, you're with her. Figure out how to talk to her. I want answers before that debris field draws attention from something bigger." "Understood," I said. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Ethan, whatever she is, whoever she was on that world, we don't hand people over to strangers without knowing why they're asking. Not on my ship." I didn't know yet how important those words would become. Over the next 2 days, something began to shift, slowly, the way trust always does when there's no shared language to rush it along. I spent most of my off hours in the medical bay, and when duty called me away, she watched the door until I returned, her small frame curled at the edge of the cot, like she was bracing for the room to disappear the second I did. Naomi rigged up a basic translation program from fragments of audio the ship's sensors had picked up during the crash. Alien speech patterns cross-referenced against whatever partial database we had on record from old diplomatic archives. It was rough. It missed half of what she said and mangled the rest. But it was enough to start. "What's your name?" I asked her one evening, sitting across from her cot, while the translator device hummed quietly between us. She looked at the device for a long moment before answering, her voice careful, like she was testing whether it was safe to speak at all. The translator crackled, then produced a string of syllables in a flat mechanical tone. "Ithra," it said. "Vessel of the," unclear word, "throne." "Ithra," I repeated, and something in her expression eased, just slightly, at hearing her own name spoken correctly. "You," she said, the word clumsy but clearly hers. "Not the machines." She pointed at me. "Ethan." "That's right." For a moment, something close to a smile touched the corner of her mouth. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, chased away by whatever memory rose up behind her eyes. "Ithra," I said carefully, leaning forward. "What happened? Where do you come from?" The translator struggled through her answer, piecing together broken fragments. "Home. Betrayed. Court. Falling." The words came out disjointed, more feeling than fact, but even through the clumsy translation, the shape of it was clear enough to chill me. She was young, younger than I had first guessed, closer to the edge of adulthood than the middle of it, by whatever standard her people measured such things, and she had been meant to rule. Not yet crowned, not yet fully in command, but next in line, the last living heir of a bloodline that had guided her people for longer than human history stretched back. Something had gone wrong. Someone close to her, someone she trusted, had turned against her family, against everything her throne represented. The betrayal had come fast and merciless, tearing through her guardians, her court, everyone meant to protect her, until the only path left had been a single battered escape pod, launched blind into open space, with no destination beyond a way. "Why here?" I asked gently. "Why this ship?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her own hands, at the faint glowing lines beneath her pale skin. When she finally answered, the translator's flat tone somehow still carried the weight of what she meant. Humans, she said. Unpredictable, not counted, not calculated. I frowned, not fully understanding. Calculated? She struggled for the right words, her frustration growing as the translator failed her again and again, until finally, she gave up on the device entirely and simply reached out, placing her hand flat against my chest, over my heartbeat, her dark eyes searching mine. They calculate everything, she said, slower this time, the words heavier, with meaning, even through their imperfection. My people. Numbers before choice, before this. She pressed her hand slightly harder against my chest. You did not calculate before you caught me. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't, not really. I had caught her because she was falling and I was standing there, and some decisions do not ask for calculation at all. Maybe that was exactly the point she was trying to make. Your people are cold, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. Not cold, she corrected, and there was something fierce in her voice now, something that hinted at the ruler she might have become, had her world not shattered around her. Careful. Careful becomes cruel, when careful people fear losing power more than they fear doing harm. I sat with that for a long moment, watching the faint golden light pulse beneath her skin, steady now instead of flickering with fear. The ones who did this to your court, I asked, will they come looking for you? Her expression tightened, and the fear I had seen in the cargo bay flickered briefly back to the surface before she pushed it down. Yes, she said simply. They will call it law. They will call it duty. It will not be either. 2 more days passed in a strange, careful calm. Ithra grew stronger, steadier on her feet, no longer needing Lena's cot, but rather a quiet corner near the observation window, where she would sit for hours watching the stars slide past, her circlet repaired just enough by Naomi's careful hands to hold its shape, if not its full function. She began learning our language faster than any of us expected, picking up words the way a starving person eats, hungrily, urgently, as if speech itself was another kind of survival. She started using my name without the translator's help within the first week. By the second, she had learned Lena's, and Naomi's, and even Victor's, though she still watched him with a careful distance that took longer to soften. It was on the 9th day, while I was recalibrating a coolant line near engineering, that Naomi's voice cut through the ship's comm system, tighter than I had heard it since the crash. Ethan, Captain wants everyone on the bridge, now. I found the bridge already tense when I arrived, every console glowing with data. Callahan standing at the main viewport with his jaw set hard. On the display before him hung a trio of sleek, polished ships, their hulls marked with insignias I didn't recognize but that made Ithra, standing at my side, go rigid the instant she saw them. Ithra? I said quietly. She didn't answer at first. Her hand found mine, and gripped it tightly, the same way it had the moment she fell into my arms, days ago, in a cargo bay full of smoke and broken metal. Peacekeepers, she finally whispered, her voice flat with dread. They found me. On the main comm channel, a voice crackled through, smooth and formal, carrying the kind of practiced calm that made my skin crawl. Unidentified vessel, the voice said. You are harboring a fugitive of the Vesser succession. Surrender the one called Ithra immediately, and no further action will be required. Callahan's eyes moved to Ithra, then to me, then finally settled on the 3 ships hanging silent and patient in the black beyond our viewport. Define further action, he said calmly into the comm. There was a pause, brief but heavy with implication. That, the voice replied, depends entirely on your answer. The bridge fell into a silence, so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. Ithra's grip on my hand had not loosened once. She was not letting go. And somehow, standing there, watching those 3 ships hold their patient, calculated distance, I understood that neither was I. Define further action, Callahan had said, and the silence that followed stretched long enough that I felt the whole bridge holding its breath around me. Captain, the voice finally answered, still smooth, still unbearably calm. The fugitive is a danger to the stability of the Vesser succession. Continued harboring will be viewed as an act of interference in a sovereign matter. You have 1 hour to comply. The channel clicked shut. Nobody on the bridge moved for a long moment. Sovereign matter, Ithra repeated bitterly, the words tight in her throat. They call it law because law sounds better than what it truly is. Which is? Callahan asked, turning to face her fully, for the first time since the ships had appeared. Ithra straightened, and for the first time since the crash, I saw something in her that looked less like a frightened girl and more like the ruler she had been meant to become. Murder, she said simply, dressed in a uniform. Callahan studied her for a long moment, then looked at me, then at the rest of the bridge crew, one by one. Naomi at the controls, her jaw tight. Victor near the weapons console, arms crossed, watching the enemy ships like a man calculating odds he didn't like. Lena, standing near the door, medical kit still slung over one shoulder out of habit. Anybody want to vote on handing her over? Callahan asked, not really a question at all. Nobody spoke. Didn't think so, he said, and turned back to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. Naomi, get us moving. Slow and steady. Don't spook them. Victor, quietly bring shields to full. Ethan, his eyes found mine. Keep her calm. And keep her close. Whatever's about to happen, she needs to trust that we're not going to fold. I've got her, I said, and Ithra's fingers tightened once more around mine, as if the words themselves were a promise she could feel. The hour that followed was the longest of my life up to that point, though I would later learn that particular record wouldn't last. We moved the amber horizon in a slow arc away from the shattered planet, putting distance between us and the debris field without making it look like flight. The 3 peacekeeper ships matched our course exactly, effortlessly, the kind of precision that told me everything about the technology behind them, and nothing at all about the people flying them. Tell me about them, I said to Ithra quietly, while Naomi worked the controls, and Callahan paced near the viewport. The peacekeepers. Who are they really? She was quiet for a moment, gathering the words carefully, her grasp of our language growing more fluent by the hour under pressure, the way anything sharpens when survival depends on it. They call themselves neutral, she said. Guardians of succession, law across many courts, many worlds, not only mine. In truth, they follow whoever offers the greatest advantage. My uncle offered much, I think, to have me removed quietly, before I could be crowned and challenge what he has taken. Your uncle did this, I said slowly. The betrayal, it was him. She nodded, something raw flickering behind her composed expression. He was meant to guide me until my crowning. Instead, he saw an empty throne with my name attached, and decided the name was the only obstacle. And these peacekeepers work for him. They work for whoever pays the calculation forward, she said bitterly. My uncle has resources, mines, trade routes, alliances built over decades, while my mother ruled, and I only watched and learned. It was not difficult for him to make my death appear lawful, once my guardians were removed. I felt something cold settle in my chest, listening to her describe her own possible death with such flat, exhausted precision, as if she had already made peace with the shape of the danger, even while still fighting to survive it. They're not getting you, I said, more firmly than I meant to. Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. You cannot promise that, she said quietly. Not against 3 ships built for exactly this purpose. Maybe not, I admitted, but I can promise we're not just handing you over, because counting the odds says we should. Something in her expression shifted at that, soft and sudden, like the words had reached somewhere deeper than she expected them to. The hour ran out, with no further contact from the ships trailing us. Then, exactly on the mark, the comm crackled back to life. Amber horizon, the same smooth voice said. Your hour has expired. We are prepared to board and retrieve the fugitive by force if necessary. This is your final opportunity to avoid unnecessary conflict. Callahan straightened, drawing a slow breath before responding. This is Captain Callahan of the Amber Horizon. Under whose authority do you claim jurisdiction over a person seeking asylum aboard a neutral vessel in open space? A pause. Then, colder this time. Under the authority of the Vesser Regency, acting on behalf of the rightful steward of the throne. Rightful, Callahan repeated, glancing sideways at Ithra. Funny word to use for a man who removed the actual heir through murder rather than succession. Silence answered him. Longer this time. Sharper somehow. Like he had struck closer to a nerve than the voice on the other end wanted to admit. "You have no standing to make such accusations," the voice finally said, though something in its careful tone had cracked. Just slightly. "Maybe not," Callahan said, "but I've got a working comm array, an open channel, and a habit of recording every conversation that happens on my bridge. If you're as lawful as you claim, that shouldn't concern you at all." The silence that followed was longer, heavier, and I found myself holding my breath along with the rest of the crew, watching the 3 ships on the display, waiting to see whether words alone could hold back what they had clearly come prepared to do by force. They did not hold back for long. The lead ship's weapon ports lit along its hull, a warning more than an attack, but a warning that made my stomach drop all the same. "This is your final warning," the voice said, all trace of diplomatic softness gone now. "Surrender the fugitive, or we will disable your vessel and retrieve her regardless." "Shields at full," Victor confirmed quietly from his station, though the tightness in his voice told me he understood exactly how outmatched 3 military-grade peacekeeper cruisers made our modest trade vessel. "Naomi," Callahan said, "get us moving. Best evasive pattern you've got. Ethan, get Ithra somewhere secure." I didn't need to be told twice. My hand found hers again, and this time it was me pulling her toward the door, though she moved without hesitation, keeping pace with me through the corridor as the ship lurched beneath us, Naomi already throwing us into a hard bank away from the lead cruiser's firing line. The first shot missed us by a margin I didn't want to calculate too closely, close enough that the whole ship shuddered from the near miss, throwing both of us against the corridor wall. Ithra caught herself with one hand, the other still locked tightly around mine, and for a moment, our eyes met in the dim emergency lighting, and I saw not fear, but something steadier. Something like resolve. "They will not stop," she said quietly, over the blare of alarms. "Not until they have what they came for, or until they cannot continue at all." "Then we make sure it's the second one," I said, and pulled her forward, deeper into the ship. We reached the reinforced storage hold near engineering, the closest thing the amber horizon had to a safe room, thick bulkheads and a door built to survive far worse than most emergencies threw at it. I got her inside, checked the seal, and turned to head back toward the bridge, where I knew Callahan and the others needed every hand they could get. Her fingers caught my sleeve before I could leave. "Ethan," she said, and there was something raw in her voice now, something that cut straight past the careful composure she had been holding since the moment the peacekeepers appeared. "If this ship falls because of me—" "It's not going to fall," I said firmly. "You cannot promise that either." "No," I admitted, "but I can promise, I'm not leaving you to face it alone, not after everything you survived to get here." Her eyes searched mine for a long moment, and then, quietly, she nodded, releasing my sleeve. "Go," she said. "Help them. I will be here." I ran back toward the bridge, through corridors lit red with alarm, the ship shuddering under near misses, weapons fire streaking past the viewports close enough to paint bright lines across the black outside. When I burst onto the bridge, Callahan was gripping the command console with both hands, Naomi weaving the ship through a storm of fire with a skill that bordered on impossible, and Victor was shouting numbers about shield strength that were dropping faster than any of us wanted to hear. "Shields at 60%, Victor called out. 60 and falling. Whatever we're going to do, Captain, we need to do it soon." "Ideas," Callahan said, not looking away from the viewport, where the lead cruiser was closing distance for another pass. "I'm open to anything." "They want her alive," I said suddenly, the thought crystallizing even as I spoke it. If this was really about clean succession, they'd have opened fire the second they arrived. They're holding back, because a dead air doesn't solve their uncle's problem, the same way a body they can produce as evidence does. Callahan's eyes flicked toward me, sharp with sudden understanding. "You're saying they need proof." "I'm saying they need her, specifically, not a wreck with no survivors. Which means every shot they're taking is meant to disable us, not destroy us." "That buys us time," Naomi said, still fighting the controls. "Not much, but some." "Then let's use it," Callahan said, already moving toward the comm. "Open a wide broadcast. Every channel we've got, every frequency this region might carry. If they want to hide what they're doing behind the word law, let's make sure the entire sector hears exactly what that law actually looks like." The lead cruiser's next volley struck our shields hard enough to throw sparks from a console near the back of the bridge, and somewhere below us, I felt the ship groan under the strain, systems flickering, warnings stacking on top of warnings. But Callahan's voice, steady and clear, rose above it all as the broadcast opened. "This is Captain Callahan, of the independent trade vessel Amber Horizon, broadcasting on open frequency to any listening ship in this sector. We are currently under attack by 3 vessels identifying themselves as Vesser peacekeepers, attempting to seize a refugee who has sought asylum aboard my ship. I am recording this exchange in full, and I invite any neutral party listening to witness exactly what is happening here." The bridge held its breath as his words carried out into the black, uncertain whether anyone at all was close enough to hear them, uncertain whether it would matter even if they were. Somewhere below deck, in the reinforced storage hold, Ithra sat alone in the dark, waiting, trusting a crew of strangers to hold a line she herself had never dared to hope anyone would hold for her. And above us, the 3 cruisers regrouped for what I suspected would be their final, decisive pass. The broadcast ended, and for a moment, nothing happened at all. No response. No pause in the attack. Just the 3 cruisers holding formation, closing distance for what Callahan had called their decisive pass, and for a handful of terrible seconds, I thought the broadcast had changed nothing. Then the comm crackled, and a new voice cut through, rougher than the peacekeepers, less polished, carrying the flat accent of someone speaking a second language out of necessity, rather than choice. "Amber Horizon, this is the independent hauler Greywind, 3 systems over, relaying your broadcast wide. You're not alone out here. Hold position if you can. Help is slower than we'd like, but it's coming." Another voice followed almost immediately, this one calmer, more official, identifying itself as a scout vessel from a nearby trade consortium, confirming they had received the broadcast and were already alerting regional authorities to the unfolding conflict. "They're listening," Naomi said, disbelief and relief tangled together in her voice. "People are actually listening. Doesn't mean they're close enough to help before those cruisers finish what they started," Victor said grimly, eyes fixed on the tactical display, where the lead ship had begun its final approach, weapon ports glowing brighter than before. "Shields at 40%, Captain. We take one more hit like the last one, we lose them entirely." Callahan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Naomi, hard burn. Get us behind that debris field from the collapsed planet. It's a mess, but it's cover, and it might slow them down enough to matter." "On it," Naomi said, already throwing the ship into a punishing turn that threw everyone not braced against something hard onto the deck. I grabbed the edge of a console, holding on, as the Amber Horizon groaned and shuddered its way through the maneuver, diving toward the scattered wreckage of the world we had first stumbled upon 9 days ago. Through the viewport, the debris field spread out before us like a graveyard, massive broken pieces of structures that had once been someone's home, tumbling slowly through the black. The lead cruiser fired again just as we crossed into the field's outer edge, and this time the shot connected, slamming into our shields hard enough to throw the entire bridge sideways. Alarms screamed. Somewhere behind me, a console exploded in a shower of sparks, and Lena, who had arrived on the bridge only minutes earlier with a medical kit and grim determination, dropped to help a crewman thrown clear across the deck. "Shields down to 15%, Victor called out, voice tight with urgency. "One more hit, and we lose them completely. Then we make sure there isn't a clean shot," Callahan said, eyes fixed on the debris ahead. "Naomi, thread us through. Use the wreckage as cover. Force them to slow down or risk their own hulls." Naomi didn't answer, too focused on the controls, but the ship banked hard beneath a massive tumbling piece of shattered structure, close enough that I saw individual scorch marks on its surface as we passed, remnants of whatever catastrophe had first torn this world apart. Behind us, the lead cruiser hesitated, just for a moment, clearly unwilling to risk its own hull against the debris at the same reckless speed. That hesitation was all Naomi needed. She cut the engines hard, spun us behind a massive fragment of collapsed structure, and killed every non-essential system, plunging the bridge into near darkness, lit only by the dim glow of emergency systems. "What are you doing?" I whispered, though something in me had already guessed. "Hiding," Callahan said quietly. "Let them think the last hit finished us. Let them come in close, to confirm the kill, before they realize we're still breathing. The bridge fell into tense silence, everyone holding their breath, watching the tactical display as the three cruisers slowed their approach, spreading out to search the debris field piece by piece. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears, I was half convinced it might give us away on its own. Minutes passed like hours. The lead cruiser drew closer, sweeping past a massive chunk of wreckage barely 50 meters from our position, so close I could see individual details on its hull through the viewport, weapons still armed, sensors sweeping methodically across the debris. "They're not finding us," Naomi whispered. "Not yet." "Keep it that way," Callahan murmured back. And then, from somewhere below decks, an alarm chirped softly, quiet, but unmistakable in the tense silence of the bridge. Every head turned toward the sound at once, and my stomach dropped as I recognized what it meant. The reinforced storage hold. Someone had opened the door from the inside. "Ithra," I breathed, already moving before I had fully decided to. I found her in the corridor just outside the hold, standing perfectly still, staring at a small hand terminal she must have taken from a supply locker inside, her face pale in the dim emergency light. "Ithra, what are you doing? We need to stay hidden." "They will find you eventually," she said quietly, not looking up from the terminal. "The debris field will not hide us forever, and every moment we hide, more of your crew is at risk because of me." "That's not your decision to make alone," I said, moving closer. "It is exactly my decision," she said, finally lifting her eyes to mine, and there was something in them now that I had not seen before. Not fear, not desperation, but the quiet, steady resolve of someone choosing to stop running. "I have spent 9 days hiding behind the kindness of strangers who owed me nothing. I will not spend a 10th hiding while they die for a fight that was never theirs to inherit. Ithra, I am going to contact them," she said, holding up the terminal. "Not to surrender, to speak, on my own terms, with the entire sector listening, exactly as your captain intended when he opened that broadcast. If my uncle's peacekeepers wish to claim lawful authority, let them claim it in front of witnesses, not in the dark, hunting a wounded ship through wreckage." I stared at her, torn between the urge to stop her and the growing understanding that stopping her would mean taking away the one thing she had left, the choice to face this on her own terms, rather than someone else's. "You don't have to do this alone," I said finally. Something soft flickered across her expression. "I know," she said. "That is precisely why I am not afraid to do it." We returned to the bridge together, and when Callahan saw the terminal in her hands, his eyes narrowed, though he didn't stop her either. "You're certain about this?" he said. "I am certain," Ithra replied. "That hiding has cost me everything I once had. I would rather stand and be seen than lose the last thing left worth protecting." Callahan glanced at me, some silent question passing between us, that I answered with a small nod. Whatever she chose, I wasn't going to be the one standing in her way. "Open the channel," Callahan said quietly to Naomi. "Wide broadcast, same frequencies as before." The terminal crackled to life in Ithra's hands, and when she spoke, her voice carried none of the fear I had seen in the cargo bay 9 days ago. It was steady, clear, carrying the unmistakable weight of someone who had been raised, however briefly, to lead. "This is Ithra, heir to the Vesser throne, speaking to whoever is listening across this sector," she began. "I am the fugitive your ships have been sent to retrieve. I did not run because I fear justice. I ran because the man who now claims my throne murdered my guardians and my court to take it, and dressed his crime in the language of lawful succession. I ask only this: let the truth stand where everyone can see it, rather than die quietly in the dark, where no one will ever know the difference." Silence answered her across the open channel, stretching long enough that I began to fear no one had heard at all. Then, slowly, one by one, other voices began to respond. Distant traders, scouts, even a formal channel identifying itself as a regional oversight authority, each one acknowledging the broadcast, each one adding their voice to a growing chorus of witnesses that no single fleet of peacekeepers could quietly silence anymore. Outside, the lead cruiser's search pattern faltered, then stopped entirely, hanging motionless in the debris field as its crew, I imagined, scrambled to understand exactly how badly their quiet mission had just become a very public problem. Ithra lowered the terminal slowly, her hands trembling now, Not with fear, but with the exhausted release of someone who had just done something enormous and irreversible. I caught her before her knees could give out, the same way I had 9 days ago in a smoke-filled cargo bay, and this time, when her hands found my jacket, I understood exactly why she had chosen to hold on so tightly the very first time we met. "You did it," I said quietly. "We did it," she corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did not do this alone. I do not think I could have." Above us, the 3 cruisers began, slowly, reluctantly to retreat. The retreat did not mean safety, not yet, and none of us on the bridge relaxed until the 3 cruisers had shrunk to distant points of light and finally vanished from our sensors entirely, folding away into whatever hidden route led back to whatever authority they now had to answer to. Even then, Callahan did not stand down the ship's systems for another full hour, watching the empty space where the cruisers had been, with the wary patience of a man who had learned, the hard way, that retreat and surrender were rarely the same thing. "They'll be back," Victor said quietly, still monitoring the tactical display. "Maybe not those 3, but someone will come, now that her voice is out there across half the sector." "Maybe," Callahan agreed. "But now, it's not quiet anymore. Now there are witnesses. That changes what they're willing to risk." Ithra sat near the viewport, wrapped in a blanket Lena had draped over her shoulders, watching the empty stars where danger had so recently hung close enough to end everything. I settled beside her, the adrenaline of the last hour slowly draining out of my body, leaving behind an exhaustion so heavy I felt it in my bones. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have never been the kind of heir who plans past the next threat. My uncle made certain of that when he stole the luxury of planning a future away from me." "Your broadcast is out there now," I said. "People heard you. That has to count for something." "It does," she said. "But hearing is not the same as believing, and believing is not the same as acting. My uncle has resources, allies, decades of careful positioning. My voice alone will not undo that." "No," I agreed. "But it's a start, and starts matter." She turned to look at me then, something thoughtful in her expression, the golden light beneath her skin, pulsing slow and steady in the dim cabin light. "You keep saying things like that," she said, "as though small beginnings are enough to matter against something so much larger." "They usually are," I said. "Most big things start small. Most impossible things start with someone refusing to calculate the odds and doing it anyway." Something in her expression softened at that, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything else, simply sitting together, in the quiet aftermath of a fight that had asked more of a small trade crew than any of us had ever expected to give. 3 days passed before the response came, and when it did, it arrived not as an attack, but as a formal transmission, carrying the seal of a regional council I had never heard of before that broadcast, one apparently responsible for adjudicating exactly the kind of succession disputes Ithra's uncle had hoped to settle quietly in the dark. Callahan gathered the crew on the bridge to hear it together, Ithra standing at the center, her posture straighter than I had seen it since the day she stumbled out of that broken pod. The message was formal, careful, full of the kind of measured language that officials everywhere seemed to share regardless of species. But beneath the formality, the meaning was clear enough. The broadcast had been heard, verified, cross-referenced against records the council already held suspicions about, but had lacked sufficient cause to investigate openly. An inquiry had been opened. Ithra's uncle had been summoned to answer for the deaths of her guardians and the manner of his ascension. And Ithra herself, as the last confirmed heir of the Vesser bloodline, was formally invited to return, under full council protection, to reclaim what had been taken from her. The bridge erupted into quiet, disbelieving relief, Naomi laughing softly under her breath, Victor allowing himself the first real smile I had seen from him since the crisis began. Ithra, though, stood very still, staring at the transmission, as though she couldn't quite believe the words were real. "It's over," Lena said gently. "Isn't it?" "Not over," Ithra said slowly, "but no longer hidden. That is not the same as safe, but it is far better than the alternative." That evening, she found me alone in the engineering deck, back in the same corridor where, 9 days and a lifetime ago, I had first heard the ship shake and gone running toward whatever emergency waited on the other side. She stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking, the golden light beneath her skin steady now, in a way it had never quite managed to be during the whole ordeal. "I have a choice to make," she said quietly. "The Council has offered escort back to Vesser space. I could reclaim what is mine, face my uncle properly, with witnesses this time, with the law finally on my side instead of twisted against me." "That sounds like exactly what you should do," I said. "It is," she agreed. "But it also means leaving this ship. Leaving this crew. Leaving." She paused, searching for words that seemed to matter more to her than any formal transmission had. "Leaving you." I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't have an answer, but because the weight of the moment deserved more than a quick response. "You caught yourself falling into my arms 9 days ago," I finally said. "Not because you calculated it was the safest choice. You told me that yourself. You did it because something in you knew it was right, even without proof, even without certainty." "I remember," she said softly. "I think you should trust that instinct again," I said. "Whatever you choose next." She was quiet for a long moment, studying me, with those wide, dark eyes that had learned, over 9 days, to hold both fear and hope in equal measure. "I am not asking you to choose for me," she said finally. "I am asking whether you would consider coming with me, if I asked." The question hung in the air between us, heavier than any alarm, any attack, any danger the last 9 days had thrown at us combined. "You'd be walking back into a court full of people who might still want you gone," I said carefully. "Politics I don't understand. Danger I can't calculate." "Yes," she admitted. "And you're asking someone who fixes coolant valves for a living to stand beside you through all of it." "I am asking the person who did not calculate before catching me," she said, "to stand beside me while I learn to rule a people who forgot how to do the same." I thought about Callahan's words from that very first night, about not handing people over to strangers without understanding why they were asking, about a crew that had chosen, without hesitation, to stand between a stranger and an unjust ending, simply because it was the right thing to do. I thought about 9 days of learning a language, one broken word at a time, of watching fear slowly transform into resolve, of a girl who had fallen into my arms and refused to let go, not out of weakness, but because some part of her had recognized, instantly, exactly what kind of steadiness she needed to survive what came next. "Yes," I said simply. I'll come with you." Something in her expression broke open then, relief and gratitude and something warmer still, all tangled together, in a single unguarded moment, that reminded me she was still, underneath the weight of crowns and counsels and betrayal, simply a young woman, who had been asked to carry far more than anyone her age should ever have to bear alone. We left the Amber Horizon 8 days later, after proper farewells to a crew who had risked everything for a stranger who fell out of the sky and refused to calculate the danger of caring. Callahan shook my hand at the airlock with something that might have been pride hidden beneath his usual careful expression. Naomi hugged me so hard I nearly lost my footing. Lena pressed a small medical kit into my hands, with strict instructions to actually use it if things went wrong, and Victor, gruff as ever, simply nodded once, which from him was practically a speech. The Council escort ship that carried us toward Vesser space was sleek, quiet, nothing like the battered trade vessel that had become, over 9 unexpected days, something closer to a home than I had ever expected a cargo ship to feel like. Ithra stood at the viewport as her homeworld grew larger ahead of us, her circlet fully repaired now, resting steady and glowing softly against dark hair, pulled back in a style I didn't recognize, but that suited the quiet strength settling more fully into her posture with every passing hour. "Are you afraid?" I asked, standing beside her. "Always," she admitted. "But less than I was. Fear calculated alone becomes paralysis. Fear shared becomes only weight, and weight can be carried, if there is someone willing to help carry it." Her hand found mine, the same grip that had once been born of pure, desperate instinct in a smoke-filled cargo bay, now steady, deliberate, chosen, rather than merely clung to. "Whatever happens down there," I said, "you won't be facing it alone." "I know," she said, and for the first time since I had met her, there was no fear at all in her voice, only quiet, certain resolve. "That is precisely why I am no longer afraid to face it." Below us, her world spread wide and waiting, full of uncertainty, politics, and a throne that had never truly been empty so much as stolen. But standing there, her hand still holding mine, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped 9 days ago, when the ship first shook, and a stranger fell into my arms, and refused to move. Some choices are not made through calculation at all. Some choices are simply made, instinctively, completely, and held onto with everything a person has left to give. She had chosen this ship, she had chosen this crew, and now, walking toward a throne she had once feared she would never reclaim, she had chosen to keep holding on. I intended to make sure she never had reason to let go.